Welcome to the Phantom Zone.
Hello, in this week's first episode, Combat. Are you ready to rumble? And then, in Progeny, in this wonderful episode, we get to meet Chloe's crazy mom. This is the Smallville Chronicles. Hello, and we're back again. I'm joined as always by Alan Muir.
Man, these were some episodes.
Yeah, that's a perfect way. I was like, yeah, they're episodes. They exist. This first one screams of what WWE was doing at this time period. Of like, I feel like paying shows to have their superstars to cross promote, which is why we get 2 in this episode.
Yeah,
and basically a plot built around wrestling.
Yeah, there's even a line saying certain characters they Vince McMahon want to be.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Which I don't mind the premise. It's just bad. Like they don't pull it off good at all. So yeah, this first episode is. Sorry, I was trying to look up and see like if this one character is a comic character, and I don't think he's the announcer guy or director. He just has a very Maddox.
Oh, no.
No, he just has a very comic book. So we open up with him. He's setting up fights in a locker room, and a guy approaches. A woman, he approaches, and there's a woman, Athena. It's like, and they're talking about like the big guy, and then Athena tells him to leave. An alarm goes off, and they grab guns, and they go out to see the big guy, Titan, going berserk, and they run away as Titan fights with Clark Kent. Flashback 46 hours early, which is a very odd period of time. Space 2 days before. So we get Clark is talking to Oliver on the phone, which is, I guess they didn't want to pay for Hartley to come back for this episode. And Martha comes in, and basically Clark, to mention, like, basically that, like, Clark's been capturing criminals secretly, and Clark is just, like, been kind of, this is his way of dealing with everything post the wedding. And he's using this to, deal with his frustrations by beating on, like, meteor freaks and possibly on zoners, because this is when we're finally getting back to that. It's like, oh yeah, we set up with this thing. We should kind of, like, go back and figure out what happened. And basically, this is where Clark finds out through Oliver that there's an underground fighting circuit. So this is like Fight Club, but it's wrestling, but it's supervillains with powers, I guess. And so then Chloe watches, and she's like, oh, this main guy, Titan, he can project energy from his hand. And like he's fighting somebody who can project Titan's unfazed, and then he kills the guy and like has like a spike come out of his arm. So I'm like, what is Titan? I guess he's supposed to be like, I feel like they're trying to play at him being like kind of Doomsday-esque here.
Yeah.
Which it would have been more fun if like they would have made this like a version of Mongol or like Lobo or something. I'm guessing they just weren't allowed to do that. But Mongol would have been like fun to do, and have him be like the person running everything, and then him be like the main boss. Would have been much more interesting than what they do. But they see that Titan has a Kryptonian prison tattoo, which I guess is a thing. So we flip over to the manor, and Lana and Lex are hanging out, and she's kind of like pulling away from him. And, and Lex is kind of like, things will be different once the baby's born. And Lex is like, it's all uncomfortable and weird. So Clark is like all pissy, and he goes to Chloe's apartment, and she figures out like the password has been changed to the site, so she's able to identify one of the people who was killed, and he was supposed to be a Bel Rev, so they know some stuff is up. And this is the return of Lois after a while, and she's working for the Inquisitor, and so they kind of hush up so that they don't tell her what's going on, because she's looking for a story. But Lois sees the screen and sees that it's like in an Air Force hangar, so she knows. Oh, so Titan is a comic character?
Yeah, he was a he was mainly a fourth world character.
That's interesting. Like, it would have been like, I do think like what the hell's his name? That's Kane. I'm just gonna always refer to him as Kane, but that's who's playing Titan.
Yeah, Glenn Jacobs.
Yeah, I don't think he's doing anything bad in this. Like, he's not the problem with this episode.
Yeah, he has a role, and he is fulfilling that role well.
Yeah. He's being like kind of silent, menacing, like crazy person, which he's good at because he did that in like, did he do like a couple of movies basically doing that?
Yeah, that
were like after this or sort of around this time. Or is it? I don't remember what they were called. He did some like weird slasher movie, right?
Yeah, the way they promoted it was having him beat up people when they mentioned the date of the movie coming out.
See No Evil.
Yeah, so every time someone brought up May 19th, he would just beat them up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Literally, the first one was before this episode because it was in 2006. Is the year before this. So like he has some acting chops, quote unquote. Like he's not the issue. It's more like
the writing of the episode.
The writing of the episodes, for instance. So Lois, seeing that as Air Force hangar, now goes to the Air Force hangar. Says she's a dancer from a strip club, which is really interesting for the show. And then she passes Athena, who is the wrestler
Ashley Massaro.
Yes, who passed away like a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Lois takes some pictures. Athena sees her and they capture her they try to capture her at gunpoint. Lois attacks them, but then the Maddox guy pulls a gun and she's captured. So Chloe's like, oh, Maddox, he's the director of Belle Rev. And then Clark just like walks into the ring to find Titan. And then he's just like, come on, bring him. Which I do think like this is the part where like this episode kind of makes sense. And also where like it makes sense to get a wrestler because they're going to understand how to do fight choreography. You need to have someone who looks physically imposing, which again goes back to like the beginning of the season when they had Batista. And because if you're going to have Clark fight anybody, it's kind of the Superman problem in live action is that like...
Yeah, you need to have someone physically imposing.
Yeah, and he's too god level tier, which this show does a good job of dealing with a lot of times, but like they need this, and it would have been better if they, again, like if Mongol could have been, and they could have played around with the way he looks, would have been an interesting like half-season villain or season villain for the show. Like if they actually wanted to do this kind of thing of like this underground kind of fighting thing as like a backdrop, like season B story, would have been cool, but they never. Kind of like what they did in Flash, although they also did it very poorly. And when he was in jail,
yeah,
the warden, I can't remember, even though he's a comic character. But they kind of did something. So while this is going on, we go back to the manor, and Lex discovers the facility in the Corto Maltese is compromised by Green Arrow, which why he has a facility in the Corto Maltese is interesting because it's not like French Riviera type stuff. I know there's like no extradition laws, but like I feel like it's kind of like a fancy place. Oh, it's not even a real place.
It's a place that's mentioned frequently in TV shows.
Yes, and it's like I think it's supposed to be like French Riviera kind of a thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like it's supposed to be fancy. I guess I've seen it in so many things I thought it was. So he goes and talks to Lana, and she's lying on the floor in pain, and it's like, oh crap. And so Lex takes her to the medical center, and then she lost a baby due to duplication, which this is a brutal story for them to put into the show. And I do think Kirk does a really good job, like being absolutely devastated by this.
Then the next episode, which gets even
like mega dark.
Yeah.
So yeah, we cut away because it's like this is like really making Lex like such a horrendous human. Like it's insane. Which we had a very fun discussion. We watched. It'll be coming out this week. Demon Knights last night, which stars Billy Zane. And if you watch that movie, Billy Zane is doing a lot of stuff like Rosenbaum kind of does in this show, except like way bigger. And I'm like, oh man, Billy Zane would have made a really good Lex.
Yeah, he would have.
If you like think about him in like Titanic, and if you watch Demon Knight, which is really like a fun 90s horror comedy, yeah, like Billy's. I was like, oh man, like he could still do it. He probably doesn't have the star power that they would want, but like on a TV show version, if we didn't have who he is awesome in the CW stuff, Billy Zane could have worked. Oh crap, what's his name? Ducky.
Oh, John Cryer.
John Cryer is so good. Like he would have been a good equal to what John Cryer, like doing what John Cryer does. Like he could have done that. But I think he could have played a little bit more of like what Rosenbaum does and like the cunning better than Cryer, where I think Cryer does the intelligence really well, which we never really get in Smallville. They never really have Lex be a super. He's just more strategic. Like he's just a strategic mastermind more than like an actual like smartest guy in the world. Also, I went way off topic here. So Clark breaks into Bel Rev. He confronts Maddox. As he leaves the night, Clark's like, I want to fight, and shows Maddox his power. Max is like, cool, brings him to the hangar, and then Clark's first opponent is Lois, and he's like, oh, I guess we have to fake the fight. And Clark uses his heat vision to destroy the equipment, and Titan spots him, and he's just like, oh, and freaks out. Which I do like him, like being like, this is where I would have liked if he would have, like, I think he says a line or two, like "son of Jor-El," but like that's would have been like good lines, like stuff like that.
He screams Kal-El and destroys the mechanism that lowers the opens up.
Yeah, and he kills the Maddox guy. But like, I think instead of yelling Kal-El, like, because like, yeah, he probably knows his name. Like, for some reason, like saying "son of Jor-El," I feel like would hit better. But that's just me. But like, I this is where like I think they again missed some opportunities. So Clark's like, Lois, you need to run, and then Titan punches him, and Lois is like, oh, Clark, you don't know how to do anything, and she tries to do stuff, and then he basically just like Luke Cage like bops her unconscious, and then it's like, all right, now we're gonna have like our full on like WWE SmackDown throw, which it does not look bad, and like they're just tearing them apart. And then Titan goes to stab him with the spike, and somehow knocks Titan into his own spike, and Titan's like, "Good fight," blah, and dies.
Yeah, that's the one part of the episode I did not understand. Like, why would it's very 90s of like the way it looks and sounds.
It's very cheese, and like they could have done this concept without having it be so cheesy. And doesn't like I don't even remember. Does the Ashley wrestler even come back?
No, her scenes are mainly
like one scene, right, in the beginning with Lois.
She has the scene where it's all pervy, where the guy's peeking at her, getting out of the shower.
Oh yeah, we didn't even mention Lois is basically dressed like Melina from Mortal Kombat in this. Like that's the only way I could describe her. Like it's a wrestling outfit, but like it looks I would say like Melina or like Elektra in the movie, like except it's made out of pleather, like red pleather. So he dies, so Clark's killed another person, and he gets Lois out of there. So then Lois out of there, then Lex's people show up, and they're like, so we found the club, and this guy's not a meteor freak. He's not human. And they're like, oh shit just got real. Like now we're doing stuff, which I do like the idea of like, I think it's 9. So we pop back over to the Ken farm, and Clark's going over the photos, and he's like, oh, there's probably more Phantom Zone prisoners. Well, no shit, dude. Like, what have you been doing? He has no idea how to return them. And he's like, well, the only way I know how to deal with them is to kill them. And he's like, I'm not really sure if like I accidentally killed Titan. And she's like, it's really, not a big, like, she's like, I know it's hard, but like, it's okay. Like, you're only human. And like, they do have an interesting conversation about like, oh, like he's pissed about Lana chose Lex over him. And Martha's like, well, you gotta let it go at some point. Like, it's done. Like, there's nothing you can really do. And then we cut to the worst storyline in the entire series. And Lana's like, hasn't left the nursery since they got back to the hospital, and she's super depressed and upset. And Lex is like, oh, your doctor was killed in a car accident the day of our wedding. Ooh, totally has nothing to do with anything. And Lex is like, no, it's just like, tries to reassure her, and then she's like, I want to see his files. I want to know what happened, what was wrong. And Lex is like, I'll figure out what I can do, like, to get them. And then it's just like, Lex is just throwing them in the fire. This is like, I don't know. It's an insane storyline, and it's like, I don't know why they included it, except to like, oh, we have to figure out how to make Lex as evil as possible, as quickly as possible. But yeah, this episode's pretty bad, which is why like it took like no time to get through, because like nothing really happens either. We get this like side B storyline, random Lois in scantily clad clothing, and then like a mediocre fight that ends really. This is like as close to an F for me as I think I could go. This is like straight D. This is terrible.
So it turns out that there's a reason that the fight with Titan is so straightforward. Clark confronts Titan's next opponent in the locker room before the fight, and the fighter reveals that Maddox promises freedom to all the fighters from Bel Rev if they win. And Clark tries to warn him that all of Titan's opponents die, and he knocks the fighter out and takes his chance to face Titan. So
yeah, like there's like a lot of, I don't know, there's a lot of goofy-ish stuff. But like again, like I think they could have done a little bit more with that fight, and I don't know, it's kind of is what it is.
And there's there's this concept of a fight or die type fight ring doesn't go away. It shows up in a few seasons.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, like, I'm pretty sure if I remember, like they bring in roulette at some point, right?
Yeah, the house.
Yeah, which she's a character that's like appeared in every iteration of everything, because they always have to have fight rings. Like she's in Justice League, and actually like a really fun episode, the one with Wildcat and Black Canary, and then she's in Arrow too, I believe, and she's in a couple episodes of Arrow. Yeah, so we can flip over to our second episode, Progeny.
Before we do, the episode sort of is important, again, sort of, because Lois gets the job at the Daily Planet because of the article she wrote about the
fighting ring.
Yeah.
She does end up getting like the better job. Although I do really like how they play like all that stuff with her, where she starts off as like this kind of goof of a writer, and then becomes like, especially because it's like what Chloe always wanted to be. So it's like this weird relationship with her like cousin that she like usurped her.
Yeah.
Which is a good segue into the second episode, Progeny. So, all right. So we start this episode, and it's flashback to 1995. 8-year-old Chloe Sullivan. She goes home and she sees her mother, Moira, and she shows her latest article. And this Moira is not to be confused with Oliver's mom. Although it's interesting that her future mother-in-law will have the same name as her mom. And her mom's in...
the queens are dead at this point.
Oh, yes. That is true. So her mom's like in tears, and she's like, why are you in tears? And her mom's like, I love you. And then some men in suits come and they take Moira away. And then we cut to their presence. Lex is driving home when a truck forces him off the road. It smashes his window and knocks him out with a flashlight, and takes the flash drive, and it's Chloe. So Chloe wakes up the next morning, and there's like muddy boots on the floor, and she's like, what is going on? Clark meets her for coffee, and she's like, oh, did you oversleep? You're acting like a little with her. I need a complete checkup to find out what went wrong. So Lex makes an appointment, which any doctor will be like, you didn't have anything happen to you, and you've never been pregnant. So on the way to the Daily Planet, you have Clark and Chloe, and they see the accident site, and Chloe's like, oh, let's look around and see what we can find. Clark uses his super hearing, and he hears Lex's security saying they whoever ran him off the road took a flash drive, and Clark sees that there's a button under the car and retrieves it. And he's like, oh, this is your button, to Chloe. So Clark's like, how the hell are you involved in this? And they go back to the talent, and they find the flash drive in her boots, and she plugs it in and finds out that there's somebody who can control meteor freaks, and is shocked to discover, it's her mom. So they, Clark and Chloe go to the facility where her mother is receiving care. Because Chloe, I think in an earlier episode, maybe last season, they showed her visiting her catatonic mom, who we only saw from the back, I believe.
Yeah.
And the receptionist basically says that Chloe was told to never come back there after causing a scene earlier that week. And Chloe's like, I don't remember any of this. And tells Clark, I haven't been here in months. I think that's what they're referring to, is like this earlier scene that like was at the end of an episode. And they say that Moira Sullivan's been transferred. And Chloe's like, how come no one told her? And Clark's like, you need to come down. And they're like, oh, there's security cameras. Let's go sneak into the security office. Like kryptonite or meteor freak army. So Clark goes and visits Lana at the hospital, and she tells him that she lost the baby like right after the wedding. And he's like, I'm really sad. Like, I know baby would have been a fresh start. And she's like, this isn't the life I wanted. And Lana's like kind of just like depressed. And she tells Clark, don't worry about me, I'll be fine. Because she's still like protecting him from Lionel. So Lex is like freaking out. It's like, you know, you caused Lana to be attacked. Whereas like, you know, stay away from Chloe. And he's like, that's too late for that. And Moira telepathically tells Chloe to leave town. So like, this is where they start to show that she has an even greater power over Chloe, which is kind of crazy. So Chloe goes to the Kent farm to get Clark to infiltrate the place, but this is when she gets taken over by the influence. She tries to fight it, and Clark tries to stop her, but eventually she's totally taken over. And she puts a meteor rock in Clark's jacket so that he can't stop her. And then she leaves. Lex and his people, you know, set up a robot, and they pick her up and bring her to the mom. She's like super happy to see that her mom is conscious, and Moira's like, I'm sorry, like I was using my powers to try to get to protect you. And Chloe's like, wait, I have a way that we can like get out of here. So they trick two of the guards, and they open the door, and they're able to like control the guy from before, Lowell, and use him as like a weapon against everybody. And Chloe gets a gun, and then Lex is in the hallway, and they're like, Chloe's like, let's leave. And Moira's like, we won't ever be free as long as he's alive, kind of a thing. And she controls Chloe to have Chloe go and shoot him. And then we cut over to Martha finds Clark unconscious on the floor, and she gets rid of the meteor rock. And he recovers fast. He's like, oh shit, I know what's going on. And he super speeds and gets there right as the gun is being fired. He hesitates for like his milliseconds or whatever. He's like, a lot of my problems be solved if he just like dies here. But he kind of is like,
in the season 2 premiere, or not season 2 premiere, in the episode where he first develops heat vision, he just instantly saves Lex, and just see how far things have turned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's less about letting Lex die as opposed to it's coming from Chloe's hand.
Yeah.
So he does stop it, and he gets Chloe, and he takes Chloe and Moira to the Queen Tower, and they have food, and basically like setting up they talk to Oliver, and they're going to set up a place to hide Moira in Star City, which is a cool name drop. Clark tells Chloe that like while they have been back, like her mom's condition has deteriorated. Moira's speech is halted, and she's slipping back into the catatonic thing because the drug only lasts for 24 hours. But she's like, I'd rather not use the drug than be used by Lex. And she slips back into being catatonic. So then we go to Chloe's working late, and Lex shows up. And that basically she's like, I'm tired of your games. And Lex is like, I have a ton of evidence that you attacked me and stole the flash drive. And Chloe's like, yeah, well, I'd rather go to jail if it meant taking you down. And Lex is like, oh, well, there's worse things than jail. And she deletes her article about basically like, or like, unless she deletes her article, like, I'm going to do like worse to you. Cause like, basically I'm going to put you where your mom was. And so we pop over to the hospital, and somehow like, this is so goofy in the story. Like, so the doctors Lana has basically aren't paid by Lex, and they're like, yeah, there was like synthetic hormones in your bloodstream, and they're like, were you faking a pregnancy just so you could like get Lex to marry you? And she's like, what?
Yeah,
like,
just
what the hell?
The amount of
make any sense.
Yeah, and like just their tone.
Yeah, like
just...
it makes sense sort of. Like, it's really shitty of them, but it's also like, why would Lex let somebody like let this out of the bag to Lana? Because then Lana has to know it was from him or Lionel, I'm assuming. So why would Lex let this happen? It makes no sense whatsoever. And then they're really shitty to her. And she's like, I saw sonograms and stuff. And they're like, I don't know what you saw, but it was not your baby. You were not pregnant. And then the doctors are like, man, if she saw sonograms, like, there's definitely like something's up. Like, someone was screwing with you. And this is when they're like kind of better, but like their judgment's like super weird. And then so we pop over and like Chloe goes to Clark and it's like, how's Lana doing? And Clark's like, he doesn't tell her about the miscarriage. He just says like she's doing okay. And Chloe's upset because like her mom will never like know how she turned out. But Clark tells her that like Clark tells Chloe that he had told Moira all about Chloe. And Chloe tells Clark about the confrontation, how he threatened her, and Clark's pissed. And he's saying like, this is war and this is just the beginning. And like they're like, but we can't do anything until like we know Lana is safe. And that's the end of this episode. So it's like all this stuff gets set up, and it's like this is a big table setting episode, but like also nothing really happens. It's just that like, oh, Lex knows everything. Lex knows that like Chloe's super onto him, and Chloe knows that like Lex also has evidence on her. And then Lana knows like the reveal that like her pregnancy was fake, but doesn't know who faked it and why. And it just like, it's almost like it's kind of a weird like first half of like another episode that takes like a bit to get to. Because we have to wait basically for the next episode and a couple other ones